Now that we've set up Prisma and our database and Superbase, we are going to be creating the database schema necessary for our movie management application. The first part of the schema will involve models necessary for our authenticated user, and we'll be making use of the Prisma adapter from the NextAuth library to save an authorized user to our database. The last part of the schema will involve the watchlist model, which will, be used to store information about the movies that, a user is going to add to their watch list. When we have everything set up, and before all that, we're going to also set up our Prisma client so that we could create database migrations and interact with our database. On the NextAuth Prisma adapter, it requires you to install the Prisma client and the package from NextAuth/Prisma adapter. If you followed along with the starter files, you wouldn't have to install any of this. So let's quickly get started with setting up our Prisma adapter in our application. First off, we're going to set up Prisma clients first. Okay, so let's get straight into that. So in our code base, we are going to right under our lib folder, we are going to create a new file. We're going to call it prisma.js. So what we are going to do right here, we want to create an instance for our Prisma clients. Remember, creating an instance for Prisma clients. So we want to make sure we have at least a single instance that is shared across the entire application, which will help improve the performance and reduce the number of connections to our database. Okay, so let's get started with that. So to set up our Prisma client properly so that we could use it throughout our entire application, we have to import it. So we're going to import Prisma client from @Prisma client. Then we are going to export a Prisma variable. This is the variable we're going to use to this is going to store our Prisma clients, and we're going to export it so that we can import it in any part of application and make use of it. So we're going to say export const Prisma will be equals to. So first we're going to check if we're going to check if a global Prisma object exists. If it doesn't exist, you're going to create a new instance of Prisma client and assign it to Prisma, which is assigned to the Prisma variable. And if it does exist, it's going to use that existing instance that is in global.prisma. Okay, so this is going to ensure that only one instance of Prisma client is created and reused across multiple requests. And like I said, the main reason for doing this is to improve performance. So let's do that. So we're going to say global dot Prisma. This is the global Prisma object. So we're going to use the conditional operator or, okay, and then we're now going to instantiate a new Prisma client object. So we say new Prisma client, the one we just imported, okay, with parentheses, and we're good. Okay, so this is it. But we also now want to check if the environment is not in production, and you're going to assign it the Prisma instance to global.prisma. So this is done to ensure that the Prisma instance is shared across all requests in the development environment. So let's do that. Move to a new line, and we're going to say if process.env.node_inf, that's the node environment, is not equals to production. Okay, and then we say global.prisma is equals to Prisma. And that's it. We are good to go. We've created a Prisma variable that's going to be used in multiple parts of application, and it's going to reduce the number of different requests you're making to our database. Okay, so now we've set up our Prisma file. We're going to go to our next configuration file and set up Prisma adapter. So let's get straight into that. So to do that, we're going to go to our NextAuth configuration file, which is located at Pages, API, Auth, and the NextAuth file that we created the video earlier. And we're going to go right above providers. We're going to add a new object, a new key in our object called adapter. So we're going to say adapter. Okay, it's going to be Prisma adapter. And Prisma adapter, Prisma adapter is going to be imported from NextAuth/Prisma adapter, which, like you see, it's been also imported in my case here. And I'm then going to pass in an argument to Prisma adapter. So the argument is going to be the Prisma client that we just created and the one we just exported, which is this one here. Remember, we are exporting it right here. So we're going to import it and pass it as an argument to the Prisma adapter class. So we're going to say we're going to type in Prisma, and if you're using VS Code, you should be able to import it automatically by typing it. If it doesn't, you have to manually import it. So make sure you don't import the Prisma client itself. Make sure you import the Prisma file that we just exported or we created. So we're going to pass in Prisma, and you're going to add a comma because we are inside an object. So we save it, and that's it. That's literally it. We have set up Prisma adapter, and we have set up our Prisma client that's going to be used in every part of the application. Next part now, which is the interesting part, is setting up our schema for our application. Let's get straight into it. So we're going to head to the schema file, which is located under the Prisma folder. Okay, I'm going to close these blueprint folders. Okay, so I'm going to go to schema.prisma, and I'm going to start writing our models for our database. And I'm going to write everything, and then I'm going to explain what each of them does after writing the whole models. It's going to make it easier to comprehend, okay? So I'm going to clear this out. Going to clear this out, and I'll start right here. So I'm going to write the accounts and create the account model. So to create a model in a Prisma schema, you start by writing the model keyword and the name of the model. So in our case, we want to create the account model. So we're going to say model, and I recommend you download the Prisma necessary Prisma extensions to make this possible. It's going to improve your productivity and help you to format your schema, and also provide tips and whatnot. And I'll place links to the extensions in the description below. So let's get started. So type in model and then the name of our model, which is let's start with capital letter and account. And it's going to be like an object, okay? A JavaScript object. So we write these curly braces, and then we're going to start writing in the attributes of our model. So we're going to start with an ID, and this ID is going to be of a string type. And they're going to pass in an ID, and which defines a single field ID on the model. And then we're going to add default, which means this is the default value for this field. Default, and we're going to pass in CUID, which is a global unique identifier based on the CUID spec. And then that's just it. An ID, okay? So after adding an ID for our account, we want to add a user ID as a string. So we're going to have a user ID, and it's going to be of type string. After that, we're going to create add a type attribute, and it's also going to be a string. So if we head back to our Prisma, the NextAuth docs rather, it's recommended if you scroll further, and as you can see here, it has all of this, which is what we're going to write down. This is the recommended schema if you want to use a Prisma adapter with your PostgreSQL, with your Prisma database file. So what it does is that this is the right convention to use if you want to enable the functionality of saving an authenticated user to your database. So what it's saying right here is, what this is going to help us to do is when next we click on the sign in button on our application, after authenticating, it's going to save the basic data of our user to the database. And this is the schema that's going to make it possible. Okay, so let's get back into writing our schema. So we're going to have the type of string, and we're going to pass in the provider attributes, provider. and it's going to be the type of string. And if you could just go ahead and copy the whole thing and paste it and maybe check back for each addition that I made. But I recommend you follow along. So we have the provider attribute. Next, we're going to have provider account. Oops, I have to make a camera case, remember? Provider accounts ID, which again is going to be a type of string. Next, we're going to have a refresh token, and going to be the type of string, and it's going to be optional. Like not every authenticated user is going to have a return string passed to it. We're going to pass in DB, and this is a native database type that should be used for this field. So DB dot text, and it has to be capital T. Oops, DB dot text. Next is going to be access token. Access token, and again, it's going to be the type of string, and it's going to be optional. And again, it's going to be of the database native database type, and I'm going to pass in add text to it. Next is going to be expires at. At is going to be an integer, but it's not going to be a number. Integer, and it's going to be optional again. And next you have token type, which is going to be a string, again, which is going to be optional. Next is going to be scope. So scope is like the set of permissions that the user has authorized us to access. So in our own case, when we sign up with GitHub, we the scope that we were allowed to have access to was just the name, the name and the email. I think the name and the email. So the scope is going to be a type of string, and again, it's going to be optional. Next is going to be the ID token, and type of string again is going to be optional, and you're going to be the native database type, so DB dot text. Next is going to be the session state, and it's going to be an optional string. Okay, so now that's all. That's the first part of the model, rather. They're going to give some space, and now this is going to be the important part. We're gonna later link a user to this account, okay? But first we're gonna create a user model later on. So we're gonna leave this blank for now. And now we're gonna create the next model, which is going to be a session model. And to do that, of course, we start with the model keyword and then session, with curly brackets, curly braces rather, and have an ID attribute, and it's gonna be a string type and a single field ID, which is going to be unique, and it's going to be the default value for this field. We're going to pass in CUID. Next is going to be a session token, which is going to be the type of string, and it's going to be unique. So this means that the value of this session token is going to be unique. And next is going to be user ID, which is going to be a type of string. Next is going to be expires, which is going to have a date time, which is the timestamp data type for a Prisma schema. And then a user attribute. Okay, we're gonna leave this for now. So you guys are going to be the same thing with the account model. We're gonna link the user in here later on, which is not later actually. We're gonna create a user model right now. So we're gonna move down a bit, and of course type in new model, then user, and curly braces, and we'll give it an ID. It's going to have an ID, of course, and it's going to be a string in our case, and it's going to have the single ID, and then of course, like the previous one, default, and passing CUID onto it. Then we have name, which is going to be the type of string. It's going to be optional. then email, type of string, optional again. Then we're going to have email verified. So it's going to, the value will be a timestamp of when the email was verified. So we're going to pass in date, time, and of course it's going to be optional. Then image, which is going to be like the profile picture of the authenticated user. It's going to be a string, and it's going to be optional. Next, account. So a user can have more than one account. Okay, so there's some apps where you could sign in with GitHub and later link that account to maybe another Google account you get. So you can maybe later sign in with both GitHub and Google and still have access to the same account. So a user can have more than one account. So these are going to reference in here. So we're going to have the account attributes, and now we're going to pass in the data type. Now models can be the data types. So we're going to pass in this account model that we created earlier. So since a user can have more than one account, we're going to pass in the data type of accounts, but not just accounts, but an array of accounts. So we're going to type in account and pass in. So this means it's going to be an array of, accounts. As you can see here. So now we're going to need a relation to it, so which you're going to handle later. So after account, the next attribute is sessions rather. So guess what? What do you think? So see, if we had an account attribute and pass in an array of the accounts model, for sessions, we're going to also pass in an array of the session model. So we're going to pass a session and these square brackets. So we're going to head back up here and reference user in both of these places. So we're going to move back here and we're going to pass in the user attributes here. So user is going to be the newly created user model. And I'm going to give it a relation field. Okay, so we're going to say at relation, which is going to define a connection between two different models. So we're going to define a connection between the account model and user model. So I'm going to say relation. And now what fields do you want to, relate to it? What fields do we want to, relay to it? So we're going to type in fields. The field you want, the list of fields that are of the current model that I want to reference. So fields. So since we are linking these two together, what is that attribute or this field here? Which of the fields here do you want to store that relation? So in our case here, we're going to use user ID. So in here, we're going to say user ID, okay, and then references. So this is going to be a list of field references of the model on the other side of the relation. In our case, it's going to be ID, which is the ID here, okay? And then, according to the Prisma adapter, we're going to have an onDelete. So this specifies the action to perform when a reference entry in the reference model is being deleted. So onDelete, we're going to pass in a cascade. Now we've done that, we're going to, let's see, in case I'm not missing anything. I think we're good to go. I think we're good to go here. Why are we having an error? This line is not a valid field or attribute definition. Okay, so according to the Prisma adapter, we'll also pass in unique. We define the compound unique constraint for the specific fields. So in here, we're going to pass in provider and provider accounts ID, and we're good to go. So in our session, remember we also reference session here. So in here, we're also going to do the same thing. So we're going to say user is going to be user, and at relation field is going to be very similar. And we're going to pick out the user ID, which is this one here, of course. I'm going to pass in references. It's actually going to be the same thing that we have in the account model. So I'm going to say references is going to be ID, and onDelete is going to be cascade. Okay, so now we've done that. We are done with, no, we're not done. I think one optional one is going to be verification. So I'll explain why this is necessary later on. So model, going to have verification. verification token and passing. I have curly braces, and the first field is going to be identifier, and it's going to be the string data type. Next field is going to be token, which is going to be string data type. And again, token is unique, so we have to pass in unique constraints, and expires a field. So the timestamp of when this verification token is going to expire. Then down here, we're going to say at unique and pass in identifier and token. And we are good to go. This is the recommended database schema for that the Prisma adapter recommends. So in our case, we don't need the shadow database URL. This is only needed when using the cloud provider that doesn't support the creation of new database like Heroku. In our case, we're using Prisma, and Prisma support the creation of new databases. Heroku doesn't. And down here we have preview features. We don't need this one too because we're using a higher Prisma. We're using a version of Prisma that's higher than version 3. Okay, so let's head back here, and we're gonna create the watch list model, which is is gonna hold the necessary data of like a single watch list, and they're gonna pass it to the user model. So let's get straight into that. So down here, gonna be the last one. I'm gonna say a model watch list, and the first field is going to be an ID, of course, and the ID is going to be string data type. Sorry, rather, it's going to be an integer. Sorry, it's going to be an integer and ID, and it's going to be default, and it's going to auto increment. So when if there's a new watch list, it's just going to auto increment the ID. So like the first watch list is going to have an ID of 1. Then if we add in another watch list, that new watch list we have an ID of 2. Next field is going to be movie ID. This is going to be the ID of the movie. And this will be necessary later on, as we see how this is going to be important when we later progress in our application. So we are going to have a name field, and a name field, of course, is going to be a string. We're going to have a rating field, and it's going to be an integer. And we're going to have a user ID field, and it's going to also be a string. Then I'm going to have poster. So the poster field is going to hold a string of the URL of the movie's poster image. So going to be a string, and next the user. So this is the user that owns this watch list. Okay, so I'm gonna define a user field here and pass in the user model and define the relation in here. So we're gonna have fields, and I'm gonna have user ID. Then the references, which is going to be the ID here. And I think that's all. Next is going to be, now we need to know the time the watch list was created, okay? We're going to have another field called created at, which is going to have the date and time stamp and default and passing now. So this means now is like a function Prisma. So like when we create a new watch list, it's going to also like at the time that watch list was created. Okay, so the function now is like going to like immediately register the time it was created and pass it in as a value. So it created that field object. And it's going to be unique. Going to pass in at unique, and so we are defining a relationship here. So the user ID and the movie ID, and we're good to go. So we're having some errors here. Error validation. This line is not a valid field or attribute definition. So let's see. Are we mixing something up? Let's go here, and it says user at relation field user ID reference ID underneath. So we're gonna go ahead to push your database to our Superbase database, which is going to be here. So we're going to click on Real Ranger Clone, and we're going to check our database. So of course, we're supposed to have an empty database. So we're going to click on the table editor, and you can see no entities available. This schema has no entities available yet. So we're going to push this schema so I can get started. So I'm going to launch a new terminal, and do just that. Okay, so to go back to the docs here, it says we should run. It says once to see your schema, use the Prisma CLI to generate the Prisma client. Now, if you had run the using starter files, you don't have this command is going to work, okay? Because we've already installed Prisma and the Prisma CLI. So we're going to run npx Prisma generate, and after that, you configure our database to use the new schema. We're going to use the Prisma migrate command. So we're going to run, so npx here means like it's going to automatically use the package manager that you use to install the library, okay? So in our case, it's yarn. So I'm just going to write it directly, and it's going to be yarn Prisma generates. So yarn Prisma generates. Okay, so it's giving us an error. So let's see how we could fix this issue, okay? We have our error staring right beside us, and we're not supposed to use the colon here. It's supposed to be a command, so a comma. So that was a minute error I made there. So I'm clear this out, and oops, how do you write this error in the first place? Okay, so I think we are good to go. Okay, we have one more here, and let's see what's wrong. Error validating user in model watchlist. The relation field user is missing an opposite. Oh, okay. So we haven't added watchlist up here. So in the user can have multiple accounts, multiple sessions, and multiple watchlist items. So we're going to say watchlists is going to be a watchlist, an array of watchlists. And we are good to go. So we're going to run our command again, yarn Prisma. I think it was yarn Prisma generate. Yarn Prisma generate. As you can see, it says generated Prisma client, and you can now start using Prisma clients in your code. You can see it's it has generated a Prisma client successfully, which we wrote here. So the doc says the next thing we should run is npx Prisma migrate dev. So we're going to do that right now. So I'm going to type, in my case, you're using yarn, so type that in instead. npm Prisma migrate dev, and give it some few seconds. And you can see it's using the connection string that we provided from Superbase. So give it a few seconds so you could migrate. And as you can see here, it says the following migrations have been created and applied from new schema changes. And if you check off, a new folder has been added, which say migrations, which gives us basic data of, it was an SQL file for us. There's an ORM that, writes these SQL queries for us automatically. So it has done that for us, and it has applied our migration. Okay. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to check our database. We're going to refresh to see if there's any new changes. And as you can see right at the sidebar, you can see accounts, and to click on it, you can see you have an ID, user ID, type, provider, account ID, refresh token, access token, fields, like we define our schema. And if I click on my watch list, which is an important feature that we need to get our watch list functionality running, you can see we have it here, which with the ID field, the movie ID field, name, rating, user ID. You can see it also shows the data type beside them. So yeah, so let's look at the account model. So the account model here has an ID field with the ID attributes, indicating that this is a primary key for this table, and the defaults, these are default CUID, ensures that this field gets a new unique identifier generated automatically. User ID field represents the user to whom this account belongs. So the authenticated user, the ID, and the type and the provider fields here. They specify the type of authentication and the provider's name respectively. So in our case here, the type will most likely be OAuth, and the provider is going to be GitHub because that's what we are using. The provider account ID stores the account ID returned by the authentication provider. So in our case, it's the one returned by GitHub. And this is going to be used to uniquely identify the user across different providers. So in our case, here, we will later add a new provider, maybe Google or let's say Stack Overflow. Yeah, you could any OAuth provider that NextAuth provides is going to help us uniquely identify them. Then we have the optional field, which is the refresh token and the access token, expires at, token type, scope, ID, token, and session state. These fields are very specific to some authentication providers, and we store them for future. So it's most likely when you want to add a new provider, this will be, depending on the provider, these fields will come in handy. Okay. So the next model we'll look at is the session model. So the session model defines a session in our database, and it's a period of time when a user is authenticated, and it's maintained using cookies. And so when a user logs in, a session is going to be created for them, and when they log out of the session expires, and then the session is then deleted. So this session model has 4 fields, as you could see: ID, session token, user ID, and expires. The ID, like previously said, is a unique identifier for the session generated with CUID, and which makes sure a new ID generated automatically. Then we have the session token, which is a unique token used to identify that particular session. The user ID field is a foreign key that references, as you can see here, it's a foreign key that references the ID of this user model that we defined here. Okay. And it indicates which session. So when we have the session, it indicates the user that owns this session. Okay. Then we have the expires field, which is a timestamp indicating when the session is going to expire. So using this session model, we can easily keep track of which users are currently authenticated and when the sessions are going to expire. So this can, we could take advantage of this to provide a better user experience by automatically logging users out after a certain period of inactivity, like for security purposes. So we're going to explain the user model next. So the user model, it defines the attributes and relationships for the user in our, as we already said, it's a unique identifier for each user, and it's set as the primary key using the ID. We call this the ID decorator. The name field is the user's name, and the email field represents the user's email address. We have the email verified, which represents the date and time that the user's email was verified. Then we have the image field, which represents the user's profile picture. The accounts field is a list of accounts that are associated with that user. So it is defined, we later define its relation up here, as you can see. And it specifies the relationship with the accounts model. Then we have the sessions field, which is a list of sessions that are associated with the user. And it's like the accounts field, it's also defined using the relation decorator to specify its relationship with the sessions model, I think. Yeah, with the sessions model. Then the watch list model, just like the 2 previous fields, it's a list of watch lists or movies that the user has added to the watch list. Like it's a list. So if we add 1 movie, 2 movies, 3 movies, everything is going to be saved to this watch list field. So it's a list of every movie that's added to the watch list. And we've previously defined the relationship in our watch list model. Next is the verification token. So this model is used to keep track of verification tokens that are sent to the users during the email verification process. So assuming we add an extra authentication provider which needs to send an email, the verification token is what handles that. So when the user signs up or changes their email address, NextAuth is going to send them a verification mail containing the link to verify their email address, and the link contains a verification token that is unique to that particular user and expires after a certain amount of time. We have the identifier token here, which is used to identify the user who the token was sent to. The token field stores the verification token itself, and it's marked as unique, of course, because and it can only be used once. Then the expires field is a timestamp of when the token expires, and it's rendered null or invalid. So this model ensures that users can only verify their email address if they have access to the verification token that was sent to them. And now the watchlist model. This model is created to handle the user's watchlist functionality, and it has the ID field, and it's the ID is the primary key of the table, and it's set to auto increment. So a unique value or a new number, a new ID is automatically generated for every single movie that has been added to our watch list. The movie ID is going to hold the ID of the movie to be added. The name stores the name of the movie, the rating of the movie. The user ID is going to hold the ID of the user who added the movie. So that's going to be our authenticated user. The poster is the image of the URL, of course, of the image, or the image source. Then we have this user field here, which sets up the relationship between the watch list and the user models, and it specifies that this user ID in the user ID in the watch list field is going to reference this ID in our watch list model. Then created as is a timestamp, that specifies when a movie was added to the watch list. So this line specifies that the combination of the user ID and the movie ID should be unique in the table. We're making a quick correction to our schema. So in our user model, we are going to add the unique attributes to our database. And we're going to head to command line. I'm going to type in yarn prisma migrate dev. So we can apply this new change to our schema. And we're asked if we want to create and apply this migration. I'm going to type in Y, which means yes. I'm going to give it a new migration name. I'm going to call this correction, and give it some time to apply the migration. And here it says the database is now in sync with your schema. Now let's check if our schema is working properly. So we're going to re-authenticate our user, and we'll see if their data is going to be saved to the database. So we're going to close our server, and I'm going to run yarn dev. Now successfully compiled, we're going to refresh our application. And we're going to click on Get Started. And our user has been successfully authenticated. So let's check our Superbase database to see if there's going to be any correction. As you can see here, it's been refreshed. And we have in our user model, in our user table here, we have an ID, the name, our email verified is null, and our image, the URL to our image. If you go to account, you can see we have the ID, the user ID, and the type. So the type is the type of authentication that was used, and in our case it was an OAuth. Then our provider was GitHub, and our provider account ID, which is going to use to differentiate in a situation where we have multiple